Mafia Boss laughed when Latina said she spoke 10 languages, but her next words left him speechless. The private dining room at Marrow and Tide hung suspended over the San Diego harbor, a glass box of polite silence and expensive seafood. The silence shattered, replaced by a heavy, compressed vacuum, when Domenico Caruso walked in. At 36, Dom Caruso was a man carved from two worlds, Sicilian and Creole, and he ruled the West Coast logistics of his family with a hand that was equal parts velvet and iron. He wore a custom suit the color of midnight, but it was his smile that held the room. It was not a warm thing. It was confident, precise, and cold as polished steel. His men, already seated, straightened their spines. The foreign partner, a nervous man in shipping, nearly dropped his fork. The reason for the meeting was seated at the far end of the table, brought in as a temporary fix, Camila Reyes Alvarez, 27 years old, a Latina academic pulled from some university department to bridge a language gap. She was there, Dom had been told, to interpret for the foreign partner, whose English was unreliable. Dom took his seat at the head of the table. His top lieutenant, Rocco Vale, leaned in. "Boss, just a heads up. The agency sent this one. Apparently, she's the best. Claims she speaks 10 languages." Dom paused, the napkin halfway to his lap. He looked down the long oak table at the woman. She was watching the water, not him. She seemed entirely unimpressed by the power coalescing in the room. He let out a low, appreciative chuckle, a sound that grated like gravel. 10 languages, Dom repeated, loud enough for the table to hear. He smiled that steel smile directly at her. "That's a lot of words. You sure you have room for all of them, sweetheart?" The men laughed, a chorus of forced loyalty. The foreign partner looked confused. Camila Reyes Alvarez turned her head. Her eyes, the color of dark roast coffee, met his. There was no fear in them, no anger, only an unsettling stillness. She did not reply in the polite, deferential Spanish he expected, nor the sharp English of an academic. Instead, a new sound filled the room. It was Italian, but not the clean, standard Italian of Rome. This was rough, ancient, and deeply familiar. It was the dialect of his grandfather's village, a place of rock and retribution. She spoke in Old Calabrese. "The goat bleats brightest," she said, her voice soft but carrying a chilling resonance. "Right before the moon hunt." Dom's smile did not fade. It froze, cracking at the edges. The blood in his veins turned to slush, his hands, resting on the table, tightened into fists. That phrase, it was not just the dialect, it was the words. A saying his grandmother, his nonna, had used, a family proverb, a code. It meant a cull was coming. It meant a traitor was being hunted. It was a phrase that only existed inside the Caruso bloodline, whispered in the dark, written in letters that had been lost, buried with the old woman herself. No one outside the family knew it. No one. He stared at her, the entire atmosphere of the room shifting from casual intimidation to something sharp and lethal. His mind was racing, trying to calculate the impossibility of what he had just heard. Who was she? How did she know? Before he could form a word, before he could signal his men, she leaned forward just slightly. The shift in her posture was minimal, but it drew his complete focus. Her voice changed again, dropping into a rapid, breathy whisper. The language shifted too, becoming the harsh, clipped dialect of Romagnol. "Tonight," she hissed, the word cutting through his shock. "They shoot from the roof of parking structure 7. Her eyes flicked to the foreign partner, then back to Dom. "Postpone the deal." Dom's brain was still trying to process the first impossibility when the second one became a horrific reality. It was not a loud noise. It was a dull phut from a high-quality suppressor, followed by the sound of stressed glass giving way. A spider web of cracks erupted on the reinforced window to Dom's left. Camilla did not scream. She did not wait. She moved with the reflexes of a predator, not a scholar. Her hand shot out, grabbing a fistful of Dom's expensive suit jacket with a strength that belied her frame. She yanked him forward and down, bodily hauling the boss of the Caruso family out of his chair. Time elongated. Dom felt the sharp, stinging spray before he heard the impact, a high-velocity round, precisely where his head had been seconds before. Tore through the air, it struck the deep red bottle of Nero d'Avola sitting in the center of the table. The bottle exploded, sending a fine mist of dark wine and glass shards across the pristine white tablecloth. It looked, for one sickening moment, like an arterial spray. The room erupted. Rocco and the other men were on their feet, weapons appearing in their hands as if by magic. They moved to the windows, returning fire at the unseen enemy on the rooftop across the water. Tables were overturned. The foreign partner was screaming under a chair. The sniper was gone, a ghost who had missed his mark. Slowly, Dom straightened up, pushing Camilla's hand off his jacket. He looked at the ruined table, the spreading stain of dark wine, the hole in the window. Then he looked at her. The amusement was gone. The casual scorn had evaporated. In its place was a suspicion so cold it burned. She had saved his life. She had also known it was in danger. This was not a coincidence. This was an audition or an ambush. "Get her," Dom said, his voice terrifyingly calm. He jerked his chin at Rocco. "Delfina base, now." His men moved, surrounding her, their expressions hard. Camilla did not fight. She did not plead. She simply rose to her feet, brushing a piece of glass from her sleeve. She held her ground as two of Dom's largest soldiers flanked her. She looked past them, directly at Dom. "I need 3 minutes," she said, her voice steady, cutting through the adrenaline and the lingering echo of gunfire. "Alone, with you." Dom barked a laugh, but this one had no humor. "You think you are in a position to demand anything?" "We need to talk about Sable Hydra," she said. The name hit the room like a physical blow. Dom's men froze. It was a name that was never spoken. A ghost file. A project so deep it technically did not exist. "It is written all over your menu," she continued, her eyes holding his. "If you know how to read in 10 different languages." Dom waved a hand, a gesture of dismissal that lacked conviction. "Take her." Camilla did not back down. She delivered her final line, her voice a quiet vow in the ruined room. "If I am wrong, you can throw me to the sea." Dom looked at her. He smelled the sulfur of gunfire, the acidic tang of spilled wine, and the faint, inexplicable scent of old books and salt air coming from this woman. He saw the absolute, terrifying certainty in her eyes. He gave a single, sharp nod. The game had just changed. Delfina Base was not a base at all. It was the penthouse floor of an anonymous glass tower overlooking the San Diego shipyards, a sterile fortress of polished concrete, steel and silent. Tinted windows, the briny metallic smell of the Port Authority cut through the expensive air filtration. They were in Dom's private office. He sat behind a desk large enough to land a helicopter on, while Rocco Vale, his head of finance, stood stiffly by the window, his expression a mask of controlled fury. Camilla Reyes Alvarez stood at a massive but smart glass table in the center of the room. On it, placed with the reverence of a sacred text, was the wine-stained menu from Marrow and Tide. "You have your 3 minutes," Dom said, his voice a low rumble. "Start talking. What is Sable Hydra?" Camilla did not look at him. Her focus was entirely on the menu. It is not a what, it is a how, and it is not just one language, it is 10. She touched the glass table, and a high-resolution scan of the menu appeared, projected from above. "Your associates are clever, but they are also arrogant. They built their code on a polyglot substitution cipher. They used the primary languages of the major shipping routes." Her fingers moved, highlighting items. "The appetizers are in Italian. The entrees are Spanish, the desserts French, but the catch of the day list," she said, her finger circling a list of 5 fish. "That is the key. They rotate. Today's list Portuguese, Arabic, Russian, Mandarin, and Japanese. The wine list." She tapped the page Dom's bullet had nearly destroyed. "Is German and the cocktails." She smiled, a thin, humorless expression. They are named using Nahuatl, the language of the Aztecs, just for flair. Rocco scoffed. This is nonsense. She's wasting our time. Am I? Camilla's voice was sharp. She pointed to a dish, El Pulpo Dorado, Spanish, the G in Dorado. Then this one, Kabeljau from the German list, the A. Then nigiri from the Japanese, the R. You see, they use the menu to pass coordinates, container numbers, and manifests, all hidden in plain sight as reservations or special orders. She zoomed in on the Nahuatl cocktail list, then cross-referenced it with the Mandarin specials. A string of characters lit up, which brings us to Sable Hydra. It is their name for the automated crane system at Pacific Mesa Port. Dom leaned forward. The blood had drained from Rocco's face. The Pacific Mesa cranes were the backbone of Caruso Logistics. It is a software backdoor, Camilla continued, her voice clinical, precise. A digital ghost in your machine. It allows them to swap containers. A legitimate shipment of textiles comes in. The crane logs it, but it picks up a different, flagged container instead. The manifest is altered. The weight is logged as carbon offset for an environmental program. The books are perfectly balanced. Carbon invoices, Rocco whispered, his financial brain seeing the ruin. But it is not textiles they are smuggling, Dom said, his voice flat. He was not asking a question. He knew. No, Camilla said. They are using your clean routes, your reputation, your entire infrastructure to move fentanyl. The word hung in the air, heavier and more toxic than any bullet. This was Dom's one absolute line. His father had forbidden it. His grandfather had forbidden it. The Caruso family moved goods. They greased palms. They enforced contracts. But they did not deal in that specific poison. Who? Dom's voice was deadly. The Vesperi Combine, Camilla said, led by Luca Vesperi. He runs the Tidal Hope Foundation, the environmental charity that receives all those carbon invoice donations. He's the one who ordered the hit. He wanted you out of the way so he could take full control of the port. He just did not expect me to know the language of your ancestors. Dom stared at her. How did you know? I am a linguist, she said simply. I trace words. I found a message on an encrypted server, a threat against Vesperi's operation, written in Arboresh. Rocco frowned. In what? An Albanian-Italian dialect spoken in only a few villages in Calabria, Camilla explained. The same region your family is from. Mr. Caruso. The message mentioned a listening post inside the whale. Before Dom could process this, Rocco stepped forward. Boss, this is enough. She knows too much. She's either with them, or she is a loose end we cannot afford. We handle this, we find Vesperi, and we put her on a boat. Dom looked at Camilla. She met his gaze, unflinching. He opened a drawer in his desk and removed a velvet box. He clicked it open. Inside, resting on black satin, was not a weapon, but a necklace. It was a single, elegant, razor-thin chain of white gold with a pendant that looked like a modern art sculpture, a teardrop of obsidian. He walked around the desk and stood in front of her. He was close enough for her to feel the heat radiating from his body, to smell the faint, expensive notes of bergamot and gunpowder. This is a leash, he said, his voice soft. I know what a GPS tracker is, she replied, her heart hammering but her voice steady. If you are lying to me, he said, if you are Vesperi's, this tracker will lead my men to you, and if you are who you say you are, it will lead my men to you if he finds you. He lifted the necklace. She did not flinch, did not move. She just lifted her dark hair, baring the pale skin of her neck. Her eyes were locked on his. Dom's fingers brushed her skin as he fastened the clasp. The metal was cold. I like working with a man who is afraid of his own mistakes, Camilla said, her voice a whisper only he could hear. He stepped back. Rocco. Boss, I am advising you. She just saved my life. Dom cut him off, the steel returning to his voice. The conversation is over. As if summoned by the tension, Dom's personal phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at the notification. His jaw tightened. What is it? Rocco asked. "A message," Dom said. He turned the screen. It was a live feed from a security drone. "Pier 14, an empty container just detonated. A warning shot." Dom looked at the screen, then at Camilla. The sniper had failed. The bomb was a follow-up, a statement of intent. Luca Vesperi was not just trying to kill him. He was trying to burn his empire to the ground. "I am done reacting," Dom said. "We find this listening post. We gut this Hydra before it cuts off my head." He turned to Camilla. The disdain from the restaurant was gone, replaced by a cold, hard pragmatism. She was a key. She was a weapon. "I can find it," Camilla said. "But that message in Arboresh, it was mixed with something else. It was not just dialect, it was slang, coded phrases." She looked him in the eye, making her demand, "I need access. Your family archives, the private ledgers, the logs your grandfather kept. I need the language you invented." Dom stared at her. She was asking for the family jewels. She was asking for the codex that translated generations of Caruso secrets. To give her that was more intimate, more dangerous than letting her into his home. It was letting her into his blood. He hesitated for a long, charged silence. The distant sound of sirens drifted up from the harbor. "Rocco," Dom said, not taking his eyes off Camilla. "Give her limited access to the archives. Level 1. She sees nothing about our finances, only the language." It was the first fragile thread of trust, and it felt, to both of them, exactly like the safety pin being pulled from a grenade. The Die Seer Foundation Gala was the Caruso family's most polished piece of theater. It was held in a renovated museum, all white marble and soaring glass ceilings, a testament to legitimate philanthropy. Domenico Caruso, master of the docks, was tonight playing the role of benevolent city patron, and at his side, a new, unexpected accessory, Camila Reyes Alvarez, introduced to the San Diego elite as his multilingual diplomatic consultant. She wore a simple, sleeveless black dress that moved like liquid silk, a stark contrast to the Kevlar vest he knew she had been testing at Delfina just hours earlier. The obsidian tracker rested against her collarbone, a secret only they shared. They were backstage, in a small private room, 5 minutes before he was due on stage. He was checking his cuffs when he felt her approach. "You are crooked," she said, her voice low. He looked down. His bow tie was indeed slightly askew. Rocco usually handles this. "Rocco is not here." She stepped into his space. The distance between them shrank from professional to personal. He did not move. He was suddenly intensely aware of her. The air around her was different from the sterile atmosphere of his office. It was warm, alive, and carried the faintest trace of something like citrus and old paper. He, in turn, radiated the clean, sharp scent of the sea and a dark, expensive amber cologne. Her fingers were light, surprisingly steady, as they brushed his jaw to get to the silk tie. He could feel the slight tremor in his own body, a tensing of muscle. As she worked, her knuckles grazed the skin of his neck. It was a clinical, necessary adjustment, but it felt like a lit match held to a fuse. The air crackled. He watched her eyes, which were focused entirely on the task. Her dark lashes lowered in concentration. "There," she said, smoothing the lapels of his jacket. "Now you look like you own the place, not like you are about to burn it down." "The night is young," he replied, his voice a gravelly murmur. He let his gaze linger for a beat too long, then stepped back, breaking the circuit. "Let's go." On stage, the gala was a success. Dom was charming, his words about community and heritage resonating with the old money in the room. He introduced a visiting shipping magnate from Kobe, Mr. Tanaka, who was crucial to a new, legitimate expansion plan. Tanaka, flushed with champagne and goodwill, bowed deeply. He spoke in rapid, formal Japanese, praising Dom's vision. Then, as he turned, he spotted Camilla and offered a more casual, regional greeting in Kansai Ben, the dialect of his home. "That whale map at your aquarium," Tanaka said jovially in the dialect, It is a finer guide than any I have seen in Osaka, a very detailed guide. Dom smiled politely, understanding nothing. Beside him, Camilla's spine went rigid. It was the confirmation she had been digging for in the Caruso archives. The listening post was not just in the whale, it was the whale, the Shorelight Aquarium. She stepped to the microphone, her public smile perfect. "Mr. Tanaka thanks Mr. Caruso for his incredible hospitality," she translated, her standard Japanese flawless. "He says the beauty of San Diego's coastline rivals that of his home, and he looks forward to a long partnership." She had shifted the meaning just enough, a subtle half-tone off-key, burying the lead. As the applause started, she turned to Dom. "We need to talk," she whispered. "Not here. Dance with me." He raised an eyebrow, but the look in her eyes was not a request. He guided her to the dance floor as a lively cha-cha started. The cameras and the eyes of the city were on them, but in the prescribed, formal movements of the dance, they were entirely alone. "He confirmed it," Camilla said, her voice precise as she spun, her hand in his. "The whale at the Shorelight. It is a map, a data drop, the listening post." "Tanaka?" Dom asked, pulling her close for a dip, his expression one of polite amusement for the crowd. He did not know what he was saying. He thought it was a legitimate, private map for shipping partners. Vesperi is using him. They moved together, a rhythm of suspicion and forced trust. The mockery Dom had first felt for this woman seemed like a distant, childish impulse. She had seen a bullet he had not, and heard a language he could not. "Vesperi is clever," Dom said, his voice tight as he led her through a complex turn. "He likes to use places with history. He likes to blow them up." Camilla looked up at him, her academic curiosity momentarily overshadowed by the raw pain she heard. "You have fought him before." He was silent for a beat. The music pulsed. "My older brother, Enzo. He died on Pier 9, 10 years ago. They said it was an industrial accident, a gas leak. He spun her out, then pulled her back in, his grip a fraction too tight. It was a setup, Vesperi's first move in this city. He took my brother and my father's trust, in one explosion." She listened, her expression unreadable. She did not offer pity. She did not offer platitudes. As the song hit its final crescendo and they held the pose, her free hand, hidden from the audience, rested on the back of his, where it gripped her waist. It was not a romantic caress. It was the simple, solid pressure of an anchor, a wordless acknowledgement. "I hear you." He saw it then. The woman beneath the 10 languages, the steel beneath the silk. And she, in that moment, saw the man behind the armor, the deep, foundational crack that Vesper had left in him. As they broke apart, Dom's phone vibrated in his pocket. A text. He palmed it, reading the message under the cover of the stage lights, one of Camilla's linguistic traps, set using the old Caruso slang, had been sprung. The message read, "Fathoms at Shorelight, midnight." The trap was set. The whale was waiting. "It is time," he murmured. He took her elbow, steering her not to their table, but toward the service corridor. "The party is over." They did not say goodbye to their guests. They moved through the frantic heat and clatter of the main kitchen, exiting into a cold, dark alley where a black anonymous utility van was waiting. Inside, the back was a miniature armory. They shed their formal wear in the cramped darkness, the scent of gala perfume and expensive cologne replaced by the smell of cold steel, ballistic nylon, and antiseptic wipes. As Dom checked a magazine, Camilla sat in the passenger seat, a parasitic earpiece in her ear. She closed her eyes, tuning her senses, below the silent fortress of the port, under the hum of the city. She began to whisper, testing the comms for any echo, any feedback that would suggest a compromise. She spoke in Guarani, a language of the deep jungle, a tongue of spirits and earth, utterly alien to these concrete canyons. "Are the stars sleeping?" Silence. Then a clean click. They were alone. They did not see the figure standing in the shadows of the alley. Half a block down, Rocco Vale watched the van's taillights disappear. He lifted his own phone and made a call, his voice a low, bitter murmur. "He is on the move," Rocco said. "The 10-tongued fish is with him." The Shorelight Aquarium was a boneyard, the grand glass rotunda, once filled with the laughter of children, was now a tomb of shattered exhibits and stagnant water. The air hung thick with the smell of cold salt, rust, and decay. Moonlight filtered through the cracked atrium ceiling, painted eerie silver stripes across the floor. "This way?" Camilla whispered, her voice barely a sound. She was not looking at the main path. She was reading the walls. What looked like random graffiti to Dom was a map to her. A scrawled line in Russian Cyrillic pointed toward the service tunnels. A stenciled tag in Portuguese, half hidden behind a fallen vending machine, indicated a power source. A third, in German, simply said "Tief, deep." She was following a breadcrumb trail left by Vesperi's technicians. "They used a multilingual system to tag their work," she explained, her voice echoing slightly. "No single person would ever see the full pattern." "Except you," Dom said, his own voice a low growl. He was a creature of the docks, of concrete and steel, and this place, this dead water palace, set his teeth on edge. She led him past the ruined jellyfish exhibit, through a staff-only door, and down a winding concrete staircase that spiraled into the earth. The air grew colder, damper. They emerged into a vast, cavernous space. Above them, suspended in the darkness, was the colossal, pale belly of the aquarium's centerpiece, the 6-story whale model. They were directly beneath it. And set into the foundation was a circular steel door, like a bank vault. A single, small interface glowed beside it. This was the blue vault. "A data bunker," Camilla said, running her hand over the cold steel. "Dry-hung servers, running on independent, blood-packed batteries. Smart. The water above provides coolant and 1,000 tons of interference." "Can you open it?" Dom asked, scanning the shadows for threats. "It is not a code," she said, looking at the interface. "It was not a keypad. It was a high-fidelity microphone. It is a biometric lock, audio-keyed." She looked at Dom, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of profound, almost sad, understanding. "Your family archives were very specific about this. Vesperi is not the only one who uses the old ways." She stepped up to the microphone. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, and then she began to hum. It was not a song Dom had heard in decades. It was a melody from the rocks of Calabria, a folk song his grandmother had sung while making bread, a song of the sea, of lost fishermen, and of the moon. But Camilla was not just humming the tune. She was using the exact obscure lilt of the Gioiosa Ionica region, a near-lost variation. Dom stood frozen, the gun in his hand forgotten. This woman, this stranger, was a ghost. She was a key. She was an impossibility. She was pulling a melody from the absolute center of his bloodline and using it to open a steel door. With a heavy hydraulic sigh, the lock disengaged, the vault door hissed open. The room inside was a web of blinking green and blue lights, servers humming softly. They moved fast. Camilla jacked in a drive, her fingers flying across a virtual interface projected onto the wall. "I am in," she said, "downloading. They call it the Gray Ledger." Data flooded the drive. It was everything. A cascading list of bribes, shipping manifests, container numbers, and names. So many names. Dom watched, his face like stone. As the hierarchy of the Municipal Services and Compliance Office, the MSCO, was laid bare. He saw captains, auditors, and city council members, all bought and paid for. A tiny, silent red light began to flash in the corner of the server rack. The system was pushing back. A silent alarm. "We have been made," Camilla said, her voice flat. She did not look up, her eyes still tracking the download. 90%, come on." Time to go, Dom said, grabbing her arm as the progress bar hit 100. He ripped the drive from the port just as they heard the heavy thud of boots on the concrete stairs above. Vesperi's soldiers. This way, Dom commanded. He did not run for the stairs. He ran for a maintenance panel at the back of the vault, one he had clocked on the way in. He kicked the hatch open, revealing a dark circular tunnel. Circulation pipe. It leads to the bay. He shoved her in first and followed, pulling the hatch closed behind them. The darkness was absolute. The only sound was the frantic echo of their movements and the distant, metallic clang of the vault door being forced. The pipe was slick with algae and filled with 3 feet of frigid, briny water. It was a tight fit, forcing them to crouch and wade. They moved as fast as they could, the cold seeping into their bones. It opens into a filtration tank up ahead, Dom said, his voice tight in the enclosed space. They burst out of the pipe, falling into a larger, cavernous chamber, dark as pitch. They landed in a heap on a grated metal platform. Camilla, her feet numb, her body shaking from the cold, slipped on the slick grating. She fell backward, a gasp stolen from her lungs, but she did not fall far. Dom's arm shot out, a steel band locking around her waist, pulling her flush against him. Her back hit his chest. His other hand came up, steadying her. His fingers splayed across her stomach. They were frozen for 1 supercharged second. She was trembling, but not just from cold. He was solid, immovable. A wall of heat in the freezing dark. Her head was thrown back, her neck exposed, and she could feel his hot, adrenaline-fueled breath against her ear. It was the most dangerous, most alive, most terrifyingly intimate moment she had ever experienced, a silent explosion in the dark. "I have got you," he growled, his voice a vibration that ran through her. The sound of the vault door finally being breached echoed down the pipe, breaking the spell. He released her, shoving her toward a wall. "Service door, find it." They fumbled in the dark, their hands hitting a rusted-out push bar. With a combined heave, the door burst open, and they spilled out onto a secondary, forgotten pier. The open night air was a shock. Camilla, breathing hard, pulled a small radio from her belt, a lift from one of Dom's men. She tuned it to the frequency Vesperi's men were using. She heard a voice, sharp and angry, in Portuguese. "They are not in the vault, find them." Camilla keyed the mic. "They are running," she shouted, her Portuguese fluent, desperate, and perfectly accented. "I saw them, heading for the east lot. Dock 12, they have the drive rapido." She tossed the radio into the water. They heard, in the distance, the sound of boots changing direction, running away from them. "Smart," Dom breathed, impressed. They ran to the end of the pier where the getaway car was supposed to be. It was there, but it was useless. A burst of gunfire had shredded all 4 tires and riddled the engine block. "He anticipated a run," Dom snarled, seeing Rocco's handiwork in the betrayal. He scanned the water. Tied to the pier was a long, low-profile cigarette boat, a go-fast boat. He jumped in, ripping the ignition wires free. "Get in!" he yelled. Camilla dropped into the passenger seat as he sparked the engines to life. With a deafening roar, the boat shot out into the harbor. Almost immediately, lights snapped on from the main pier. Gunfire erupted, bullets zipping past them, churning the dark water white. "They have us," Camilla yelled over the engine. "Hold this," Dom said, shoving the data drive into her hand, "and steer." He grabbed a marine flare gun from the dash, broke it open, and shoved a custom-packed cartridge from his pocket into the chamber. He fired it not at the shooters, but straight up. It exploded with a blinding, thermite-white flash, followed by a plume of incredibly dense, black smoke that fell like a curtain, instantly obscuring them. Camilla held the drive, the small piece of tech suddenly feeling immensely heavy. She looked at the screen of the small, waterproof tablet Dom had used to secure it. The file name was there, Gray_Ledger. But as she watched, the text flickered, the letters scrambled, the word Hydra glitched, dissolved, and reformed. The file was now labeled Hera. Camilla stared at it, the blood draining from her face. "Dom," she said, her voice shaking for the first time. "This is not Vesperi, or it is not just Vesperi." He glanced down, his face illuminated by the green glow of the dashboard, his eyes hard as he navigated the dark waves. "Who the hell is Hira?" The call came not to Dom's phone, but to a burner device left in the cigarette boat. It was a ransom demand. Stripped of all emotion, they had 1 hour, the gray ledger, all of it, in exchange for a life. The location Sable Junction, a ghost town rotting in the Anza Borrego Desert. The voice on the recording was distorted, but it was not the voice that mattered. It was the image. A live video feed showing a woman tied to a chair in a derelict gas station. She was older, her hair iron gray and braided, her face a map of proud, stubborn lines. "Zia Alma," Dom whispered, his voice cracking, all the steel in him turning to glass. She was his madrina, the woman who had practically raised him, his family's moral compass, his last link to his mother. "Send me the audio file," Camilla said, her voice sharp, pulling him from the edge. He sent it. They were back at Delfina Base, the fortress now feeling like a tomb. Camilla sat at the main console, the sound wave of the distorted voice on the screen. She was not listening to the words, but to the sounds between the words. "She is from the Rust Belt," Camilla said after 2 minutes of intense focus. "Western Pennsylvania. She drops her L's. She hits the A in junction too hard. It is not Vesperi. It is an American. Someone educated, but who grew up poor." She cross-referenced the vocal signature with the Caruso employee database, running a voice-matching algorithm. A profile flashed on the screen. Nadia Quinn, Chief Financial Officer of Caruso Logistics. "Rocco was the muscle," Camilla said, her voice cold with discovery. "Nadia was the brain. She has been inside your books for 5 years. Dom looked at the image of Zia, then at Nadia's corporate headshot. The betrayal was absolute, a rot that had been festering at the heart of his family. "It is bait," Dom said, his voice dead. "She knows me. She knows I will come for Zia, no matter the cost." He slammed his fist on the concrete desk. "And if Zia is the bait, I still have to bite." "We do not give them the ledger," Camilla said, standing. "We give them a copy, a Trojan horse. We swap the drive, and I plan an audio trap." She held up a tiny, wafer-thin transmitter. "This is a passive listening script. It will activate only when it hears a specific, complex phonetic sequence, a sequence no one would ever say by accident." Sable Junction was a collection of broken teeth gnawing at the night sky. The wind howled through the skeletons of long-dead buildings. The only light came from a single, failing neon sign on a defunct diner, buzzing and flickering, painting the scene in strokes of septic green and blood red. They walked down the center of the dusty street, Dom and Camilla alone. "Now," Dom murmured. Camilla, as if speaking to herself, said a short, complex phrase in Swiss German. "Die Sonne scheint, aber sie schmilzt not." The sun is shining, but the ice is not melting. The code was spoken. The trap was armed. The diner door scraped open. Luca Vesperi emerged, flanked by 2 soldiers, and with him, in a tailored desert ops outfit, was Nadia Quinn. Zia was there, tied, but as Dom had seen, unharmed, her eyes sharp and furious, found Dom and she spat on the ground. "It is a simple trade, Domenico," Nadia said, her voice now clean, no distortion, all corporate crispness. "The drive for the old woman. Let's not make this complicated." "I see you, Luca," Dom said, ignoring her, his eyes locked on Vesperi. "Finally out from behind your charity galas?" "Business, Caruso. Nothing personal," Vesperi replied. "This is where it gets tricky," Camilla said, bowing, stepping forward. She held the drive. "You see, Nadia, your French is excellent, your Parisian accent is flawless, but the file names... Your password recovery was set in French-Canadian, a tiny mistake, a char for a car. You left a breadcrumb." Nadia's eyes narrowed. This was the test, the cat-and-mouse game of language. Camilla continued in Russian. "You must have thought no one would ever check the metadata." Nadia replied in flawless, clipped Russian. "A good CFO checks everything, my dear. The drive." Guns were up. The tension was a living thing, a screaming wire in the wind. "I do not like this," Nadia said. "Kill them. Take the drive." As the soldiers raised their rifles, Zia Alma, who had been waiting, her wrists raw, bit through the last fibers of her rope restraints. With a guttural cry, she lunged not at the soldiers, but at the diner's condiment caddy, grabbing 2 shakers. "Taste the salt, you bastards," she roared, throwing handfuls of salt and pepper directly into the eyes of the guard closest to her. The man screamed and fired blind. The night exploded. Zia Dom roared, diving, grabbing his godmother and pulling her behind the cover of a rusted-out truck. Vesperi and his men opened fire. Camilla, her own weapon drawn, did not move. She was on her comms, her audio feed now directly linked to Nadia's earpiece, which she had hijacked with the Swiss-German trigger. "It is over, Nadia," Camilla shouted, switching to Moroccan Arabic, a language of trade and double dealing. "Your boss is gone." "You know nothing," Nadia screamed back, her own comms feeding her panic, thinking she was talking to a compromised Vesperi. "Hera is not one man." "Then what is it?" Camilla pressed, still in Arabic. "It is a council. A council of financiers." Nadia stopped. Realizing her mistake, she'd been played. A new sound joined the firefight, the heavy thwack, thwack, thwack of an inbound helicopter. A sniper's spotlight hit the street. "Get them!" Vesperi yelled, pointing at Dom and Zia. Dom saw the red dot land on his chest. He shoved Zia down. He had one shot. He did not aim for the sniper. He aimed for the massive, rusting fuel barrel on the gas station's roof. His shot was true. The barrel, still holding ancient fumes, erupted. The massive diner sign, its supports vaporized, tore free and crashed down onto the street, a curtain of steel and broken neon that blocked the sniper's view completely. "Go, go, go," Dom yelled, pulling Zia toward a deep, sandwash gully at the edge of the ghost town. Camilla was right behind them, laying down, covering fire as they plunged into the darkness and disappeared. They made it back to Delfina as the sun was threatening to stain the sky. Zia was asleep, sedated and safe in the med bay. Dom found Camilla in the office, watching the city wake up. The gray ledger, the real one, was safe on the main server. He stood behind her, the silence stretching. She could feel his presence, the exhausted, heavy weight of the night. He reached up, his movements slow, his fingers calloused and warm, brushed the skin of her neck as he fumbled with the clasp of the GPS tracker. The obsidian teardrop had never felt so heavy. With a soft click, the necklace came free. He did not put it in a box. He did not toss it on the desk. He held it in his palm, a silent offering, a token of a surrendered strategy. Camilla turned to face him. The first real light of dawn hit his face, illuminating the exhaustion, the pain, and the new, terrifying respect in his eyes. "From now on," Domenico Caruso said, his voice raw, "I am the one following you." Delfina Base was compromised. Nadia and Rocco had known every camera, every exit. It was a tomb, and the ghosts had won. The new sanctuary was a Caruso-owned wine warehouse in Santa Verena, an anonymous, temperature-controlled bunker filled with sleeping vintages. It was a cavern of warm, dark wood. The only light came from low-wattage tungsten bulbs that cast everything in a soft, amber glow. Outside, a sudden, fierce Pacific storm had broken, and the sound of heavy rain drumming on the tin roof was a constant, percussive roar, isolating them from the world they had just escaped. They were in a small tasting room, the air thick with the smell of old oak, dust, and evaporated Cabernet. Dom was cleaning a fresh gash on his forearm. Camilla was just standing. She was staring at a rack of bottles, her hands clenched so tightly at her sides that her knuckles were white. She was vibrating. The adrenaline from the ghost town, the firefight, the high-speed escape had finally caught up. It was a fine, uncontrollable tremor that started in her hands and was now shaking her shoulders. Dom finished bandaging his arm. He saw her, saw the delayed shock, the body finally admitting what the mind had been ignoring. He moved slowly, as if approaching a skittish, high-strung thoroughbred. He did not speak. He did not offer a blanket or a drink. He simply stood in front of her, and after a long, silent moment, he lifted one heavy hand and placed it on her shoulder. It was not an act of possession. It was not a precursor to an embrace. It was an anchor. It was a simple physical statement: I am here. You are not falling. The contact was electric. Camilla's breath hitched, a sound that was half sob, half gasp, the dam of her composure. Held in place for days by sheer linguistic brilliance and adrenaline, finally broke. Her shoulders slumped, and she leaned her forehead against his chest, her whole body shaking. Dom did not move. He just let his hand rest on her shoulder, his other arm hanging at his side, his body a bulwark against her collapse. He could feel the frantic, wild pulse of her heart against him, a trapped bird. After a long time, the shaking subsided, replaced by the steady, deep rhythm of her breathing. She did not pull away, but she lifted her head. The words were gone. They had used up all the languages, all the codes, all the tactical commands. There was nothing left but this. His eyes, dark and unreadable in the amber light, were no longer looking at a tool or a weapon. They were looking at her. He saw the exhaustion, the fire, the impossible, terrifying intelligence. She saw the raw, exposed man, the boss who had just had his family and his empire torn out from under him, the man who had been willing to trade himself for Zia. His gaze dropped to her mouth. It was a silent, direct question. Her answer was a slight, almost imperceptible shift in her weight, a tilting of her chin, a closing of her eyes. Yes. The kiss was not the one from the gala, a fantasy of cameras and performance. This was the opposite. It was slow, it was deliberate. It was a collision of two people who had been running on empty. His lips were not soft, but they were not rough. They were firm, hesitant, and carried the faint taste of salt and the night's cold air. It was a question, and she answered by pressing back, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, her fingers curling into his shirt, not to pull him closer, but to hold on. Their breath mingled, a shared, unsteady rhythm, finally sinking like a lock clicking into place. It was a giving and a taking, a retreat and an advance. He was not demanding. She was not surrendering. They were simply meeting, in the one place where language, bullets, and betrayal could not touch them. When he finally pulled back, it was only by an inch. Their foreheads rested together. They were breathing the same air, their heartbeats a new, shared dialect. They stood like that for a long time before moving, in unspoken agreement, to a row of massive oak barrels. They did not face each other. Instead, they sank down, their backs against the wood, their bodies side by side, shoulders and hips pressed together. A soldier's intimacy. She was his left flank. He was her right. Dom found her hand, his fingers lacing with hers, his calloused, rough skin a stark contrast to her own. They sat in the warm darkness, listening to the rain on the roof. Camilla was the first to speak, her voice a rough whisper. She used Spanish, the soft musical cadence of the Caribbean. Cuando salga el sol, seguimos siendo aliados. When the sun rises, we are still allies. A promise, a boundary. This is for now, for this one night. He turned his head, his rough cheek brushing her hair. He answered in the one language she did not know, the one language he had never shared, Sicilian. Mai avuto fiducia in nimu como a tia, he said, his voice thick. I have never trusted anyone like you. It was a confession that was both a shield and a spear, a terrible, beautiful burden to place on her. We have a new rule, Dom said, switching back to the English that had become their neutral territory. From now on, no blind revenge. We do not burn the city to catch Nadia and Luca. We do not become them, Camilla agreed. We saved the people they put on that list. We saved the port, he said, solidifying the new mission. We cut the head off the snake, not set the jungle on fire. In the quiet that followed, a new sound, thin and distant, cut through the rain, a fire siren, and it was miles away, but it was a reminder of the world outside, the city that was still burning in its own way. But in here, for one small, stolen hour, there was silence, a safe, warm, shared silence. Then, a phone buzzed on the floor. It was Zia's burner, which Dom had. The screen lit up, a text from Zia's secure number, sent from the med bay. Camilla read it over his shoulder. MSCO just received an anonymous, encrypted file. It's the fake ledger, the one implicating you. Someone is playing the public. Dom, they are not just trying to kill you, they are trying to erase you. The rain had stopped, but the dawn at the Miramar warehouse was harsh and gray. The new headquarters was a skeleton of steel beams and raw concrete, a construction site buzzing with the sound of generators and saws. It was the perfect place to hide. Chaos was camouflage. In the site's main office, a trailer reeking of plywood and welding ozone. Dom and Camilla were illuminated by the glow of the gray ledger. "Hera," Camilla said, her voice rough with exhaustion. "It is not one person. It is a board. 3 unidentified financiers, masked by nested shell corporations. They are using the Vesperi Combine as a blunt instrument." Dom traced a line on the screen with his finger, connecting nodes of influence. They are not just smugglers. They are the bank. They own the MSCO. They own the IFIU. He named the federal entity that was now hunting him the Interstate Financial Integrity Unit. They built a pipeline for Vesperi's fentanyl, and they are using my roots to do it. Now they want to frame me for the whole operation, cut the head off the Caruso name, and absorb my logistics chain. "There is one more layer," Camilla said, her fingers moving over the interface. "The final partition. It is not a standard encryption." She looked at him, a flicker of academic admiration in her eyes. "It is an Atbash cipher, but it is multilingual. It cross-references Yiddish, based on the Torah, with glyphs from Nahuatl. It is insane. It is beautiful." She typed a complex key, a string of logic that no brute force program could ever guess. The final file unlocked. It was not another list of names. It was a schedule. "The Night Zephyr," she read. "It is a private freight train. They are not just trusting the digital ledger. They are moving the physical master drive, the core of their entire operation. Tonight." The news of the MSCO leak the fake ledger Zia had planted had hit the city wire. The Caruso family was being painted as a rogue state. Dom's assets were being frozen. The pressure was immense. He called a council. In the hollow, echoing cavern of the unfinished parking garage, the remaining captains of his organization gathered. They were shadows in the dim work lights, their faces tight with fear. "The IFEU is seizing our accounts," Sal, his oldest capo, said, his voice heavy. "Hera has us in a box. They are too big. Domenico, we should negotiate. Give them Vesperi. Give them the port. We cut our losses and we live." "Live as what?" another captain shot back. "They're puppets. We should run, take what cash we have, and vanish." Dom stood in the center of the circle, his hands in his pockets. He waited until the murmuring died. "We are doing neither," he said. His voice was quiet, but it commanded the concrete space. "We are done running, and we are done being their sewer." He projected the evidence onto the raw cement wall, Nadia's secret financial transfers, Rocco's security log deletions from the night of the aquarium. "We were betrayed," Dom said, his voice flat. "From the inside, Nadia Quinn and Rocco Vale. They sold us out for Vesperi's fentanyl money. They fed us to Hera." A heavy, sick silence fell over the men. This was not an outside enemy. It was family. "Rocco is gone," Dom continued. "Vanished the moment we left the dock. Nadia is with Vesperi, pulling his strings." He looked at the faces of his men, seeing the split, the indecision. "The old way is over," Dom declared, his voice ringing with finality. Hera is choking on the fentanyl routes Nadia and Rocco built, so we cut them off. As of today, Caruso Logistics is 100% clean. No more poison, no more gray. We fight them with legitimate business. We expose them for what they are. He met Sal's eyes. We will be the ones who burn them. Who is with me? It was a schism. Half the men looked at the floor, their loyalty broken by fear. The other half, the ones who remembered his brother Enzo, the ones who had built the company on his father's principles, slowly, gravely, nodded. The Caruso family had just broken in too. As the dissenting captains filed out, defeated, Zia Alma stepped from the shadows. The city thinks you are weak. Domenico. The IFIU thinks you are cornered. A fierce, cold smile touched her lips. It is the perfect time for your funeral. 2 hours later, the newswire lit up. A high-speed boating accident. The wreck of the cigarette boat had been found near the Coronado Bridge. Domenico Caruso was missing, presumed dead. The effect was immediate. The legal pressure from the MSCO and IFIU lightened. Hera, believing their primary scapegoat was now conveniently disposed of, relaxed their guard. And, as Camilla's listening network confirmed, they moved the Night Zephyr's departure time up. They were getting sloppy. While the city mourned, Camilla went on the offensive. She synthesized Nadia's voice from the ransom call and Vesperi's from the ghost town. She began planting voice baits, short, conflicting audio bursts in Old Portuguese into their encrypted WeComs channels, hinting at betrayal, suggesting one was about to flip on the other. She set them to hunt their own ghosts. Dom, meanwhile, had fully abandoned Delfina. The Miramar warehouse was his new fortress. He was invisible, a ghost in his own city. In the site office, they planned the attack. Dom, Camilla, Zia, and the 3 loyal captains, a map of the night. Zephyr's route was spread across the table. It is a military-grade transport. One of the captains, Knuckles, said, tapping the manifest. Networked security. They will have audio sensors, digital tripwires, the works. Their security is electronic, Camilla said, her eyes bright. It is automated. It is listening for keywords, digital flags. It is not prepared for a linguistic logic bomb. It is not prepared for me. She outlined the plan. I will be a living beacon. I will tap into their comms network. While you move, I will feed their central security system a cascade of conflicting, high-priority audio. I will speak German to their track maintenance, reporting a phantom rail flaw. I will use Russian to contact their engineers about a non-existent engine fire. I will use Japanese to alert the automated cranes at the depot of a false container breach, and Arabic to their private security, warning of a sniper team that is not there. She would, in effect, conduct an orchestra of pure chaos. I will create a Tower of Babel inside their system, she said. It will paralyze their response protocols, forcing a manual reboot. That will be your window. Dom looked at her, the scale of her strategy settling on him. This was not a gunfight. This was a symphony. And if they catch you, if they shut you down... Camilla met his gaze, her expression calm. They will not catch me. She did not tell him about the failsafe. She did not tell him that the real gray ledger was now tied to a dead man's switch on a server in Iceland. The script was simple, tied directly to her voice. If she stopped speaking, if she was captured, if she was killed, if she failed to reset the countdown timer with a specific audio key every 10 minutes, the entire unredacted gray ledger, with the names of Hera's board, their MSCO and IFIU puppets, would be released globally. I speak their language, she said, her voice soft. All of them? The Night Zephyr was a black steel snake, unmarked and silent, sliding through the moonless desert. It did not rumble, it hissed. As it passed the abandoned Santa Fe depot, 6 figures detached from the shadows and ran alongside it. The sound of high-torque magnetic clamps locking onto the steel skin of the rear logistics car was a series in K-chunk sounds. Lost in the rhythm of the wheels, Dom, Camilla, Zia, and the 3 remaining loyal captains hauled themselves up, the desert wind screaming past, trying to peel them from the metal. The sand in the air was a physical assault, stinging every inch of exposed skin. "We are on!" Dom yelled over the gale, his voice flat. "Camilla, do it." They moved like spiders across the roof, the train bucking under them. Camilla, braced against a ventilation unit, opened her encrypted comms panel. The symphony of chaos began. Her voice, cool and steady, cut into the night. First in German, she reported a critical track flaw at kilometer marker 40, a phantom crack in the rail, forcing the train's automated maintenance AI to slow. Seconds later, she was speaking Russian to the engineering systems, warning of a power fluctuation in the main engine. Then, Japanese, flagging a non-existent container imbalance to the depot's automated cranes, followed by a conflicting order in Italian. She was creating a traffic jam of digital impossibilities. Finally, she hit the security net in sharp, authoritative Arabic. She reported a sniper on a ridge, then used French to request visual confirmation from a private security channel, sending Vesperi's merc scrambling to find a ghost. Under the cover of her linguistic fog, Dom, Zia, and the captains reached the target, a refrigerated car, its locks digitally sealed. "Now," Dom ordered. While Camilla continued her monologue, a cascade of false emergencies, Zia and a captain used a portable plasma torch. With a high-pitched hiss, the lock melted. Dom kicked the heavy door open. They dropped inside. It was not a cold car. It was a vault. A climate-controlled data center on wheels, bathing them in the cold blue light of server racks, and she was waiting for them. Nadia Quinn sat in a leather chair at a small desk, as if expecting them for a board meeting. 2 Vesperi soldiers flanked her. "Domenico," she smiled, her voice dripping with condescension. "You are just so predictable. Did you really think the head of Hera's port operations, would not know you were faking your own death?" She held up a tablet, the screen glowing. "And it does not matter, you are all under arrest. I took the liberty of contacting our friends at the MSCO, a clean official warrant." Dom did not even look at his men. He squinted at the screen. "That is a good fake. Nadia, very thorough." He stepped forward into the light. "But MSCO does not use that font. It is too soft." Camilla, still murmuring into her radio, glanced up from the corner. "And," she added, her voice calm, "their official documents never misspell autorization. They know where the accent mark goes." Nadia's smile vanished. "Kill them!" The narrow car exploded. It was a vicious, close-quarters fight. Dom's captains engaged the soldiers. Zia, when one of the men grabbed for her, proved she was no hostage. She drove a small, wickedly sharp docker's hook, hidden in her sleeve, deep into the man's side, disabling him instantly. He crumpled with a wet, gasping sound. Dom lunged, not at the soldiers, but straight at Nadia, grabbing her, spinning her around, and pressing the muzzle of his gun to her temple. "Call them off!" he roared. But Camilla, in the corner, her eyes wide, was fighting her own war. She had a gun in one hand, but her radio was in the other. She could not stop. The dead man's switch, the 10-minute timer. She was still speaking, her voice now strained, a rapid-fire stream of German. "Notfall, ich wiederhole. Notfall auf Gleis." The forward door of the car slid open. Luca Vesperi stood there, framed against the raging desert wind. He was untouched by the fight, and in his hands, he held a heavy-gauge shotgun. He did not aim at Dom. He aimed at the explosive charge planted on the coupling just outside the door. "Give me the translator, Caruso," Vesperi bellowed over the roar of the train and the gunfire. "Her, or the whole train goes into the ravine. Your choice." Nadia, trapped in Dom's grip, started to laugh, a wild, high-pitched sound. "He will do it. Dom, he does not care about the ledger. We are the bank." Dom looked at Vesperi, then at Camilla. Her eyes were locked on his, terrified. But she was still speaking, her voice shaking but unbroken. She was trusting him. He had told her he would not burn the city. He would not sacrifice his queen. He made the choice. "You want her?" he yelled at Vesperi, And then he shoved Nadia, shoving her with all his force out the door, straight at Luca. Vesperi, caught off guard, stumbled back, grabbing for Nadia. In that 1 second of chaos, Dom lunged forward, past them, onto the swaying metal plate between the cars. He grabbed Camilla's arm and yanked her out of the firefight, pulling her with him. "Zia, disconnect," he screamed. Behind them, Zia and the surviving captain slammed the car door shut. Dom, with Camilla pressed against his back, reached for the manual release lever on the next coupling, the one separating their car from the ledger vault. With a superhuman pull, he threw the lever. A scream of tortured metal ripped through the night. The train violently broke apart. Zia, the captains, and the ledger car began to slow, separating from them. Dom and Camilla were trapped on the front 3 cars, which, freed of the back's weight, began to accelerate. A runaway missile of steel. Vesperi and Nadia were in the car just behind them. "They are trapped with us," Dom yelled. Camilla looked at the tablet in her hand. The GPS. They were screaming toward a deep canyon. Dry arroyo. The only way across was a single, guarded bridge. The only escape. She grabbed her radio, her mind working faster than the train. The chaos was done. It was time for control. She switched frequencies, hijacking the Border Patrol dispatch. Her voice changed, becoming cold, flat, and official. She spoke in flawless, authoritative Mandarin. "Control to Unit 47. We have an unauthorized decoupling, high-risk security breach." She rattled off a string of authentication codes she had pulled from the ledger. "I have visual on the runaway engine. Engage the emergency stop barriers at Dry Arroyo. I repeat, engage all barriers. Now." The Dry Arroyo Bridge was a skeletal hand reaching across a 100-meter drop. The wind, a hot, howling Santa Ana, screamed through the steel trusses, making the entire runaway car shudder. Luca Vesperi stood in the open doorway, the shotgun leveled not at Camilla, but at Dom. His face was a mask of furious desperation, the wind tearing the words from his mouth. "Yeah, give her to me, Caruso!" he roared, his voice cracking. "The girl the ledger is just a file. It is worthless if you are dead. Give me the girl." Dom did not flinch. He did not move to bargain. He simply stepped sideways, placing his body squarely between Vesperi and Camilla. It was not a negotiation. It was an answer. Camilla Guillet, pressed against the bulkhead, was not looking at the gun. She was listening, her head tilted, feeling the rhythm of the wheels beneath her feet. Click-clack, click-clack. She was counting. She knew this line. She knew the automated switching junction was just ahead. She mouthed the calculation. 84 seconds. "You are a fool! Caruso!" Nadia Quinn screamed, her voice cutting through the wind. She was on her own radio, her face pale with fury. "You had a chance to be a king, now you die." She switched channels, her voice becoming a desperate plea. "This is Quinn IFIU Task Force, hostile contact. Officer down. The target is on the bridge. Take the shot, take the shot." A red laser dot, thin and sharp, appeared on Vesperi's chest. "No, wait, not me," he bellowed, his eyes wide, realizing the betrayal. The sniper team, mercenaries hired by Hera and posing as IFIU, was now locked on him. Camilla saw her opening. She grabbed her own comm, jamming the frequency. Her voice was not a plea, it was a command. She spoke in a blistering, rapid-fire mix of Portuguese and Italian, a bastardized code she knew the hired guns would misinterpret. Stand down, the asset is compromised," she shouted. "The primary target is Vesperi. He is the traitor, I repeat. Vesperi il traditore. He is flipping, take him." The sniper, confused, hesitated. Nadia screamed, "No, you idiots, him Caruso." The entire car, hitting a warped piece of track, gave a violent, sickening lurch. Camilla was thrown from her feet, her body flying toward the open door and the abyss. She never hit the ground. Dom's arm, the one he had shielded her with, shot out, catching her, crushing her to his chest in a desperate, bone-deep embrace. In that half-second of impact, Luca Vesperi saw his chance. He raised the shotgun, aiming for Dom's exposed back. He fired. The blast was deafening. Dom roared, an animal sound of pure agony as the pellets tore through the flesh of his left shoulder. But he did not let go of Camilla. He held her, his body a shield, the scent of cordite and his own blood filling her lungs. And in his arms, Camilla Reyes Alvarez made her choice. She was still connected to the satellite uplink. She still had the key. Her voice, though muffled against his chest, was clear and cold. She spoke the final failsafe, the words that would burn the world down to save it. She spoke in Nahuatl. Tlatla totonqui, she whispered, the ancient words of vow. Amo Tlatlani in Ilhuicac. The lightning does not ask the sky for permission. The script was executed. Across the West Coast, in boardrooms, in government offices, in secure federal facilities, phones began to vibrate, not just a few, all of them. The gray ledger, in its entirety, went public. The names of the 3 Hera financiers, the offshore accounts, the recordings of Nadia's transactions, the names of every bought official in the MSCO, the organizational chart of the fake IFIU. It was not a leak, it was a deluge. Hera's shadow war was now lit by 1 billion screens. Nadia's tablet, still connected to the news feed, lit up with her own face. "What did you do?" Vesperi shrieked, lowering his gun, his eyes hollow with the realization. "What did you do?" No, Nadia screamed, clawing at her tablet. "Cancel it, undo it." It was too late. The mercenaries Vesperi had hired, the men on the ridge, saw their own names and handler contracts flash across the public wire. They were exposed, burned, abandoned. One by one, they vanished, their radios going silent, their loyalty dissolving into self-preservation. Vesperi's soldiers, the ones still on the train, looked at each other, then at the open door. They jumped, choosing the slim chance of the rocky ground over the certainty of capture. Nadia Quinn was backed into a corner, her face a mask of primal, cornered animal hatred. "If I burn," she hissed, "I'm taking the bridge with me." She lunged, not for a gun, but for a detonator on the wall. Hera's final protocol. She slammed her hand down on the button. A series of explosions erupted from beneath them. The bridge's support trusses, packed with charges, began to detonate. The world tilted, the steel screamed, the front of the train, its wheels leaving the track, began to plunge into the canyon. "Dom!" Camilla screamed. They had one chance. One. The automated rail switch, the one she had been counting down to, was just meters away. A small, parallel gantry used by technicians. "Now," Dom roared. He grabbed her hand, his grip crushing. "On my count, all of them." They were falling, the car sliding into the void, but they were together. "Uno!" he yelled. "DVA!" she screamed. "Trois viergo!" They recited the numbers in a chaotic, desperate litany: Spanish, Russian, French, German, Japanese, Arabic, a 10-language prayer. They jumped. They left the train car, a coffin of steel, and launched themselves into the screaming wind. They hit the gantry hard, a brutal impact of flesh on metal grating. They tumbled, rolling, clutching each other, as the Night Zephyr's Ledger car plunged into the dry Arroyo Canyon, disappearing in a spectacular, fiery explosion, a man-made shooting star. They lay on the edge of the failing bridge, the world shaking around them. Dom was on top of her, his blood dripping hot onto her cheek. He was breathing, but just barely. Camilla, shaking, her voice raw, pushed a strand of hair from her face. She looked at the blood, then at the burning wreckage below. "There is one more language," she panted, her voice trembling but alive. "The language of choice." The first light of dawn was a pale, pink wash over the high desert. It illuminated the wreckage in the canyon, a smoking, twisted pyre of steel. But the real fire was happening digitally, all across the nation. Screens were lit, the gray ledger was public, the MSCO exposed as a hollow shell. The IFIU, revealed as Hera's private army, the Vesperi Combine, cut off at the head, was already dissolving, its assets frozen, its operations in chaos. On the surviving gantry of the dry Arroyo Bridge, the air was still, Dom was breathing heavily, his hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder, trying to stay upright. Camilla was at his side, steadying him. "It is not over!" The voice was a raw shriek. Nadia Quinn, her face a mask of dirt and pure hatred, was staggering up from the twisted wreckage of the rail line. She had a small pistol in her hand, and she was aiming it at Dom's back. Before she could fire, a shadow moved faster. Zia Alma, who had arrived with the loyal captains via the road, stepped out from behind a concrete pylon. She was not armed with a gun. She held a heavy-duty mooring rope. With a practiced flick of her wrist, she snapped the rope like a whip, the weighted end catching Nadia across the wrist, shattering bone. The gun clattered onto the grating. As Nadia screamed, Camilla grabbed her comm. She saw Vesperi, further down the track, trying to get to a maintenance vehicle. She keyed the rail dispatch, her Japanese sharp and absolute. "Kinkyu jiko subite no reiru o roku seyo." She ordered an emergency lockdown of all rails, trapping Vesperi on the bridge. Vesperi saw he was cornered. He let out a roar of pure, animal rage and charged, not at Dom, but at Camilla. This is all your fault." Dom saw him coming. Adrenaline surged, cutting through the pain. He met the charge. He did not grab his gun. He grabbed Vesperi. The two men, the new guard and the old, crashed against the safety railing. They were a tangle of limbs, rage, and history. Dom was weaker, bleeding, but he was fueled by something Vesperi lacked a future. Vesperi slammed Dom against the rail, aiming for the wounded shoulder. Dom grunted, the pain a white-hot nova, but his grip held. He twisted, using Vesperi's own momentum, and slammed him onto the steel grate. Dom's gun was in his hand. He pressed the muzzle to Vesperi's forehead. Their eyes met. Vesperi's were terrified. Dom's were clear. The old Dom, the Sicilian prince, the man who lost Enzo, would have pulled the trigger. The click of the hammer would have been the final punctuation. But he looked past Vesperi, at Camilla, who was watching. Her breath held. He saw the path of blood, the endless cycle. He lowered the gun, and he heard sirens, not police, but something else. Vehicles from the newly formed, civilian-led Pacific Port Commission, the organization he had secretly funded, were arriving, drawn by the public data release. Dom hauled Vesperi to his feet. "He is yours," Dom said to the arriving auditors. "He is alive, and he has a lot to say." This was Dom's final choice. He was not just cleaning his business, he was cleaning his bloodline. He was cutting the cord that tied him to the old laws of the jungle. He chose justice over revenge, breaking the cycle of blood for blood. The rest was a cascade. The 3 financiers of Hera were named. Politicians resigned before noon. Accounts were frozen. The city's throat, choked for so long by the invisible hand, was finally free. Days later, in the Miramar warehouse, Dom stood before his remaining council, the men who had stayed. "Hera is gone," he said, his voice quiet but echoing in the concrete hall. "The Vesperi plague is over, but the poison remains." He looked at each captain. "From this day forward, there is no more fentanyl. Not in my ports, not in my trucks, not in my city. We are clean." He tapped a projected logo on the wall, a new name, Tide and Trust. He met their eyes. "Anyone who walks the old path walks out that door, now." No one moved, one by one. The captains raised their hands, not in a vote, but in an oath. Camilla watched from the back. He had offered her anything. She asked for a job. She was now the director of language sanitation for Tide and Trust. Her job was to clean the code, to ensure the logistics were as transparent as the data, to ensure no Hydra could ever grow in the dark again. They returned to the bridge. It was weeks later. The air was cool. The desert healed. They stood at the repaired rail, looking down into the canyon where the Hydra had died. He had a new scar on his shoulder. She had a new confidence in her eyes. He turned to her. The laughter he had had at the restaurant, the cold steel, was gone. In its place was a warmth that matched the desert sun. He did not pull her close. He simply placed his hand on her cheek, his thumb grazing her jawline. It was a gesture of profound, gentle possession, an oath. The kiss was not the desperate, rain-soaked collision in the warehouse. This was slow, it was warm, it was deep and full of promise, a seal on a new contract. It was the language of choice. When they broke, she smiled, her eyes tracing the lines of his face. She whispered, her voice a breath of air. The same phrase, cycling through the symphony of her mind, in Italian, in Spanish, in Arabic, in Russian, in Mandarin, in Japanese, in German, in French, in Portuguese, and finally, in the Nahuatl that had burned their enemies. 10 languages, one truth. "You no longer laugh in doubt," she whispered at last, in English. "You laugh in faith." He took her hand. They turned their backs on the canyon, the ashes of the Hydra, the ghosts of their past. They started the walk back toward the city, toward the coast, where the sea and the port were waiting for someone to restore order. Behind them, the wind swept the last tattered remnants of the old empire away. Ahead, a clean empire, and a love that had finally learned to speak a single, shared language. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are listening from. Please comment below, share your thoughts, and let's connect. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give us extra support by hitting that hype button to help this story be heard by more people.